So I was a little bit hesitant about including Heroes for Hire as part of our Civil War discussion. And the whole reason for that is because for the most part, Heroes for Hire doesn't really do a whole lot in terms of progressing the main Civil War storyline, but what it does do is really kind of serve the purpose of showing us just how deep this rift between the superhero community goes. And we had talked about this when we began our conversation, our videos about the Civil War event. We had talked about how we will see stories like Civil War Frontline that will show us that there really isn't anyone that's really kind of being spared with regards to the Civil War event. That for the most part, everyone's kind of choosing sides. Now, to do a little backstory here, Heroes for Hire was originally a group that was founded under Luke Cage. And in fact, when Luke Cage first appeared in Marvel Comics, his comic book was titled Luke Cage Hero for Hire. And for the most part, that's exactly what he was. He was a person that people could go to if they needed something done, if they needed something accomplished. So think of the Heroes for Hire as a team, as a Marvel version of the A-Team. If there's anything that you need to have done, if there is a goal that you need accomplished, or simply something you need investigated, they would be the people you go to. Now, the team is kind of hit and miss when it comes to superpowers. Characters like Paladin, for example, have enhanced abilities, but they're only slightly above superhuman, whereas you have individuals like Colleen Wing, who really has no superpowers. She's just a very athletic individual. And then you kind of have people who are in the middle, like their leader, Misty, who has a bionic arm, but aside from that, there really isn't anything that she has that nobody else could gain just by physical training or anything along those lines. Now, as the comic book begins to open up, what we actually see here is really kind of an introduction to the team. We really kind of see some information here showing us how it was that the team came together, because this version of Heroes for Hire is actually the first iteration that we see during the events of Civil War. This Heroes for Hire issue number 1 is the newest version of this team. There have been different variations over time. Of course, Colleen and Misty were really kind of assistants, or really kind of, I guess, sidekicks to Luke Cage, but they weren't really the main stars. Now, in this comic, they are. And what's really kind of interesting about this version of Heroes for Hire is that, with the exception of maybe an individual like Paladin or maybe Humbug and Shang-Chi and possibly Orca, I'm not 100% sure where this stands, this team largely consists of women. Now, this is a very cool concept in Marvel Comics because, for the most part, you don't really see teams that are largely composed of women. Either it is kind of a 50-50 split, or maybe a 60-40 split of men and women, or it is a larger proportional, ratio between men and women, where there are more men than women. But you don't really see an instance where you see more women than men. And that's what makes this comic really kind of cool. That's what makes the Heroes for Hire, or at the very least this current version of Heroes for Hire, really kind of stand out. But again, these individuals don't really have a whole lot in terms of superpowers when it comes to the Marvel community as a whole. Now, once we get past the introduction phase, once we really kind of see some of the escapades that they got into, we see that Misty and Colleen are meeting with Spider-Man, Captain America, and Reed Richards, and they're really kind of enlisting the aid of Heroes for Hire to track down and capture Captain America. Now, the big kind of issue here, what's really kind of going on in the mind of Misty, is she's concerned that not everything is what it seems to be, that their role will kind of be fulfilled as far as them being able to track down and possibly capture Captain America, but she's afraid that once that's done, they're going to be rounded up just like everybody else. Now, for the most part, they're in support of superhuman registration. They think this needs to happen. They think that it's about time that superheroes were held accountable. But again, she's really kind of concerned about this. In addition, her other concern is that they have individuals out there in the superhero community that are friends, that are allies of the Heroes for Hire group, and so she's a little hesitant about about tracking down these individuals, about really kind of tracking down their friends and turning them in for refusing to register. Not only that, Heroes for Hire, because of the nature of the work that they're in, they have a lot of contacts. They're largely a detective kind of team, and so it's very important that they can form contacts and not have to worry about those contacts maybe suffering some kind of reciprocation, maybe suffering some kind of hazard of being a contact for the Heroes for Hire. Now, I think that one of the most interesting parts and one of the most important parts about this whole conversation between Spider-Man and Reed Richards and Iron Man is when Misty brings up the idea of slavery. Now, Misty doesn't necessarily bring up this concept of slavery to really kind of bash them over the head, but what she says is that just because something is a law doesn't mean that it's okay. And in fact, some of the worst laws in history have been overturned by people openly defying them. And she really points to the idea of Susan B. Anthony, that in 1872, Susan B. Anthony had gone and voted for a congressman despite the fact that it was illegal for blacks to vote at the time. And that as time progressed, because of the backlash of this and because of other events that had taken place, that law was overturned. Now, Iron Man goes as far as to say that this isn't really kind of a black and white issue, that this isn't really a racial issue, that this is an issue of what's for the greater good. But we see that Colleen really kind of combats this and says that the issue here is that when you have a law that really kind of disenfranchises people of civil rights, that it will always end in a violent conflict of some sort. Ultimately, the group really kind of comes to terms with Captain America and his stance. I'm sorry, with Iron Man and his stance. They really kind of come to the to an agreement where we see that Misty says that if they are going to do this, if they are going to really kind of try to undertake the role of capturing Captain America, that she's going to need all the resources that Tony Stark has, that she's going to need all of the I guess maybe the money at his disposal, not in the sense that they're going to use it all, but in the sense that there really can't be anything holding them back. There really can't be anything that gets in their way. And so Iron Man ultimately agrees to this and says that no matter what happens, that no matter what takes place, that they will be protected, that they will not have to be concerned about the idea of being turned in or of being, I guess, stabbed in the back once their task is complete. From here, we switch back to Chinatown, and we see that Misty and Black Cat and other members of the Heroes for Hire are kind of meeting together. And we see that Black Cat returns with some information saying that Vienna, a well-known supervillain in the Marvel community, is helping people escape the country. She's providing new passports, providing new identities, and the people are going underground because of it. Now, they don't exactly know where this is going on. They don't exactly know how this is happening, but they have a few ideas. One of which is to head to the shipyards, because it's the easiest way to leave the country. In addition, we see that Humbug is able to use his powers to talk to various insects in order to really kind of comb the streets and really kind of listen into what's going on, gain information, and ultimately discover where it is that Vienna is at. Now, Vienna is actually near the shipyard. She's actually kind of in a downtown underground area of Manhattan. And we see that she's meeting with various villains to really kind of provide them with information they can use to leave. Now, the villains are really kind of a mishmash of different people that we've seen in Marvel Comics, and for the most part, we're really not going to go too in-depth into them. But we see that Heroes for Hire, we see that Misty and Humbug and Black Hat and Colleen and others are able to break into the facility, and they begin to fight these supervillains. Now, we ultimately see as things progress that for the most part, these supervillains get the upper hand on Heroes for Hire. But then we see that Paladin and Shang-Chi and Orca are arriving on the scene, and they're able to help turn things in support of the Heroes for Hire. Ultimately, Heroes for Hire is, of course, successful in defeating these supervillains, and we see kind of an interesting scenario going on here where Misty goes as far as to say that they have an upper hand on all of these superheroes, on Iron Man and Captain America and various people, because at the end of the day, they don't know who to trust. They don't know who they can go to, but that Heroes for Hire is not going to have that question, that they can trust each other because for the most part, they exist as a cohesive family. So as we continue with Wolverine Volume 3, issue number 45, what we see is that, as with previous comics, this comic picks up from the previous events. Now, what's really kind of interesting here is that we see Wolverine and Namor the Submariner engaging in physical combat. The two of them are actually fighting, because as we saw with the previous comic, Namor the Submariner had really kind of appeared and made it apparent that he was the person that had, I guess, established all of these sleeper cells, or at the very least woke them up, so that they could engage in the activity or the investigation of trying to find the killer of Namorita. Now, here's what's really interesting when it comes to the idea of these Atlantean sleeper cells. For the most part, we don't know who put them there. We don't know how they got there. We don't know when they were there. We really have no idea at what point this whole project involving the Atlantean sleeper cells began. We don't know if maybe they were established within the first time that Namor the Submariner had inherited the throne of New Pangaea as the leader of the Atlantean kingdom. We don't know if maybe it was after the Illuminati were formed. We have no real clue as to when it was that this takes place. All we really know is that somewhere along the line, sleeper cells, Atlanteans who were masquerading as humans, began to move about on the surface, and we don't know what their purpose was. One of the really interesting things that we see when it comes to a comparison between the Atlanteans and humans is that the Atlanteans, for the most part, hate humans, and this is really kind of a cool aspect of their characters. Very rarely do we ever really see an instance where Atlanteans will have normal dealings with humans. They're very inhuman. They're very similar to the Inhumans in this way. The Inhumans, for the most part, really kind of exist off on their own. They really kind of exist totally separate. And under normal circumstances, Black Bolt would never really have any dealings with normal people. And in fact, his dealings with anyone outside of his own people, of the Inhumans and their own territory, is really kind of isolated to the Illuminati. With Namor the Submariner, it's the exact same way. But this is where the two get a little bit different. Where Black Bolt says he wants nothing to do with humans, Namor the Submariner at some point along the line seems to have sanctioned this kind of endeavor where he is really kind of using sleeper cells as a way to ensure that nothing really happens. Because these individuals are sleeper cells, they don't know that they are Atlanteans. They are just kind of woken up at some point in time. And so it's not as though they're kind of reporting information back to Namor the Submariner. It's not as though they're kind of keeping him aware of events that they are unfolding here on the surface. They're just kind of there, or at least that's the perception that we're given of them. And so when you look at this idea of sleeper cells, the one thing to kind of bear in mind is that we have no idea how this started. We have no idea how long they've been there. And what we'll see as this comic really kind of progresses is that this is a point that Wolverine raises to Tony Stark. So as we continue with the comic, we of course see Namor the Submariner and Wolverine continuing to fight one another. And what's really kind of cool here is that Namor the Submariner and Wolverine are really kind of just in a knockout, drag down kind of brawl between one another. And for the most part, they're really kind of having an even fight. We see that Wolverine knocks Namor the Submariner down, and as he does, he goes to, of course, dress himself, and the two of them again begin to fight once more. Now from there, we kind of see some witty banter back and forth. We see the two of them kind of taunting one another. We see that Wolverine really kind of says that he expected better of Namor the Submariner because Namor the Submariner is royalty. He is the king. He's the leader of Atlantis, of the New Pangaea territory for Atlanteans, and so he thought that he would have a little more strength, maybe a little more fight. At the same time, Namor the Submariner more or less says the same thing, that Wolverine has a reputation for kind of being a murderer, and he really kind of taunts him by asking if he murders people by boring them to death. In response to this, Wolverine uses his adamantium claws to impale Namor the Submariner. Now at this point, Janus attempts to come to the aid of Namor the Submariner, but Wolverine incapacitates him quite quickly, and in fact he actually takes off his breathing mask and really kind of exposes Janus to the oxygen-rich atmosphere. Now this is one of the inherent traits of Atlanteans in the sense that they can't breathe our normal oxygen. They have to have a sort of breathing apparatus that they use occasionally in order to allow them to survive on our surface. From here, we see him throw one of their transformation darts into the neck of Paul, and Paul becomes incapacitated. And then we switch to this unknown woman who has apparently put one of their weapons to the throat of Nitro. Now, this is really kind of a ruse. This is really kind of designed to keep Wolverine off of his toes, and we see that Namor the Submariner reemerges, shouts Imperious Rex, and then knocks Wolverine unconscious. Now, one of the questions a lot of people have when it comes to Namor the Submariner is, what does Imperious Rex mean, or does it even mean anything? As far as I understand it, Imperious Rex has no real importance when it comes to Namor the Submariner. It is really kind of a battle cry. It's the equivalent of I guess maybe Thor using his hammer, or picking up his hammer and shouting Valhalla, or the Beard of Odin, or something along those lines to really kind of, I guess maybe get himself rallied up, or to get other people rallied up for the upcoming conflict. And what we see is that Namor the Submariner and this unknown woman and Nitro really kind of begin to fade away as Wolverine becomes unconscious, and then Wolverine is knocked out entirely. Now from here, Wolverine comes to, and once he realizes that the two of them, or I'm sorry, that all three of them have taken off, he really kind of begins to try to pick up their scent. And the reason for this is, of course, Wolverine, one of his most prominent abilities is the ability to really kind of sniff anyone out, but also because Atlanteans have a very distinctive scent. And because Atlanteans are almost never on the surface, it's not only very easy for Wolverine to pick up their scent, it's also very easy for him to hold it, just because there really isn't going to be an instance where he's going to lose their scent because it's so unique. From here, we see that he's able to track their scent down to the water, and from there, he really loses the ability to track them further just because he doesn't have the ability to swim underwater. He calls for assistance from Iron Man, and Iron Man appears, and of course, Wolverine kind of talks to him and says, I need your ability, I need your assistance. I'm not able to travel underwater, and I need to track down Nitro from the hands of Namor the Submariner so that he can, effectively stand justice for the crimes that he's committed. At this point, we see that Iron Man has actually lent his suit to Wolverine, and Wolverine has a little bit of inner monologue here. He really kind of has an instance where he, really kind of expresses what he's thinking and what it was that led to Iron Man allowing him to use his armor. Initially, Iron Man didn't want to use it, or didn't want to do it. Iron Man did not want to give his armor to Wolverine, but Wolverine pointed out the fact that there are a handful of sleeper agents that have been found so far. And again, he points out the same thing that we had discussed earlier, that at some point along the line, these sleeper agents were installed by the Atlantean people, and so we don't really know where these sleeper agents are at. We don't know who they are. We have no idea who they could be. And so because of this, this is really an instance whereby they need to gain as much information as they possibly can. And so after this is kind of revealed by Wolverine, of course, he says that Iron Man allowed him to use his armor. At this point, we see that Wolverine has reached New Pangaea, which is the home territory of all the Atlanteans, and is the one place in which all of them reside. What we also see is that he confronts, Namor the Submariner. And Namor the Submariner is initially not very receptive to Wolverine, but he doesn't realize it as Wolverine. To him, this is Tony Stark. And Wolverine really kind of plays on that. Wolverine really kind of plays on the idea that Namor the Submariner thinks he's Tony Stark, and he really kind of moves forward accordingly. What we see is that initially, Namor the Submariner is under the idea that to his eyes, Iron Man wants to take Nitro to allow Nitro to stand for his crimes, but it's not nearly going to be as vengeful or as justified as the actions that Namor the Submariner is going to take against him. In addition, we see that one of the things that's really kind of discussed here is that he had made a bargain, that he had really kind of told Nitro that if Nitro gives the necessary information, that he won't kill him. And so Wolverine is again trying to maintain this bargain. He's really trying to uphold his end of the deal. And this is really kind of important here because this really kind of goes in line with the idea that Wolverine is a very honorable person. And what we see is that ultimately Wolverine, as he's kind of talking to Namor the Submariner, is Namor the Submariner says, he killed my cousin. He killed one of the members of the royal family. And so why should I release him? If you can give me one good reason, then I will let him go. And Wolverine says, I will give you 6 reasons. And of course, he reveals his claws. At this point, of course, Namor the Submariner realizes that it is Wolverine. He tells Janus to attack, but Wolverine is able to overpower Janus relatively fast, albeit due to the fact that the suit moves pretty slow compared to how we can normally move on the surface. From here, we again see that Namor the Submariner and Wolverine begin to attack each other, and the two of them fight for only a few moments or so. In addition, he takes one of the women who have attacked him on behalf of Namor the Submariner, and she really kind of pleads with him to kill her because they're never going to let Namorita go. Wolverine's really kind of holding her hostage at this point. Wolverine's really kind of saying, if you don't give me Nitro, I'm going to kill this woman. But she doesn't mind dying because to her loyalty is to Namor the Submariner. It is loyalty to the royal family, and this is really kind of the way that most Atlanteans kind of view the royal family of the Atlantean people. They're really kind of dogmatic in this sense. To them, honor is the most important thing, and the royal family is the most important thing. And this is really kind of a throwback or kind of an allegory to the mindset of the Japanese people during World War II. But what we see is that Namor the Submariner is really kind of in a position where he doesn't want to see another one of his people die. He doesn't want to see another one of these people be killed. And so he asks the question of Wolverine, why is this murderer worth your word? And he says he's really not, but he made him a promise. He told him that if he is willing to give information that is necessary to really kind of highlight the bigger picture, highlight to what it was that allowed Nitro to detonate in the first place, then, they'll go a little bit easier on him, I guess, or Wolverine just won't kill him outright. And so Namor really kind of takes note of this. Namor really says that, you have come from the surface and trespassed on our property. You are going to effectively strip me of the justice that is deserved for the death of Namorita, but in the end, you have honor, which is something that I can respect. And so we see that Namor the Submariner has Wolverine and a few other people taken to the whereabouts of where Nitro is being held, where Nitro is kind of being interrogated. But what we see is that Nitro has killed the husband of the woman that Wolverine was going to kill, the person who was interrogating him. From here, she really kind of freaks out. The wife begins to kind of go insane and attempts to attack Nitro. But we see that ultimately Wolverine kind of gets in the way, is able to stop her, and is able to spare Nitro's life. Now, initially, Wolverine is ready to kind of take Nitro away, but he really kind of second guesses it. He says no more. This is really kind of the last straw for Wolverine. His idea was to take Nitro and to gain the information that was necessary to really kind of highlight the bigger picture and then hand Nitro over to S.H.I.E.L.D. But this is no longer going to be the case. He says no more bargains, no more victims, no more reprieves. And what he does is he hands Nitro over to Namor the Submariner. He really kind of grants Namor the Submariner the justice that they felt they were deserved. And this is a very important move on behalf of Wolverine, because what we see is that in response to this, Namor the Submariner meets with Wolverine and tells Wolverine that the information Wolverine was looking to get from Nitro in the first place had already been gathered, and that a company called Damage Control Incorporated had given Nitro the mutant hormone, mutant growth hormone that had really kind of contributed to him being able to detonate on such a scale. And so with this information, the comic really kind of becomes to an end, and we see that that Wolverine, we presume, is going to begin to go on a warpath a second time to try to find out more about this company and try to implement his own plans to bring this company down.